Good afternoon and welcome to today's press conference with Prime Minister Ulf Kristersson and the President of the European Council Charles Michel. The press conference will be available on the Swedish government's website government.se.
Välkomna hit. Welcome to this press briefing and welcome Charles. I'm very happy to have met with President Michel today to talk about the 6 months ahead of the Swedish priorities to help make Europe greener, safer and freer, the three keywords to summarize our ambitions. And we have a lot to do together these 6 coming months. Just a few words. Before saying anything else, I would like to say this. The Swedish government condemns in the strongest terms Russia's continuing systemic attacks against civilians, civilian objects and critical infrastructure in Ukraine, including Saturday's missile strike on an apartment block in the town of Dnipro. Innocent civilians, including children, lost their lives or were wounded in this horrific attack. So let me be very clear. Intentional attacks against civilians are war crimes. Those responsible for war crimes will be held to account. For as long as it takes, the EU and Sweden will continue our broad support for Ukraine. It is, as everybody knows, very challenging times for Europe and, of course, the worst of times for Ukraine. It is my very strong belief that we are going to need the combined strengths of EU legacy, of the 3 EU institutions and of EU unity to take us through all the problems ahead of us. Making Europe safer is first and foremost about maintaining support for Ukraine, in military as well as in political and economic and humanitarian terms. Staying united, sticking to unity, avoiding divisions between European countries and between European countries and the US is key, not least when Russia wants us to be divided. Ukrainian victory is existential for Europe. Unity is our greatest asset, and during the presidency we will continue to support the European military assistance mission to support Ukraine. So no other single task could be more important for the Swedish presidency than this one. The fate of Ukraine is also the fate of Europe. Our second priority is making Europe greener and focuses, of course, around 2 concrete objectives: to phase out Russian fossil fuels and to scale up the green transition in transport and in industry. Several law files are now in trilogue negotiations, and our aim is to finalize these during the Swedish presidency. This includes reviews of the Renewable Energy Directive and the Energy Efficiency Directive, as well as proposals to phase out CO2 emissions in the maritime transport sector and the development of infrastructure for alternative fuels such as electricity, hydrogen and liquefied methane. Making Europe finally freer is about upholding our global standing and the core values of the single market. The single market actually celebrating its 30-year anniversary this year. One of the presidency's priorities is safeguarding strong European long-term competitiveness and productivity. Focus on tools at European level, internal market, trade, competition rules, and better legislation. But making Europe freer is also about reducing harmful dependencies. That means making our economies more resilient towards external pressure and diversifying the value chains. And I would like to highlight also democracy and the rule of law. Values making Europe an example for the rest of the world. But we can never take it for granted. We will continue to work on the rule of law dialogue in the General Affairs Council, as well as maintaining Article 7 procedures on the agenda. These are, in short, the Swedish priorities for the 6 months ahead that President Michel and I have talked about during today's lunch, and I'm looking forward very much to further cooperation in the upcoming and the following Swedish 6 months of presidency. Please, Charles.
Thank you. Thank you, dear Prime Minister, dear Ulf, for your warm welcome. It's a great pleasure to be back in Stockholm, and I would like first to congratulate you on the launch of Sweden's third presidency of the EU Council. And like you said, you are taking the reins at a pivotal time for Europe. Sweden's priorities clearly reflect our common goals. First, to help strengthen Europe's security. Russia's war against Ukraine is the gravest threat to Europe and the world since World War II. Second, to reinforce Europe's competitiveness. A strong and competitive EU is key to our economic future and our standing in the world. Third, driving forward Europe's green and energy transition, and this is true. The EU is a global leader in climate action, and we want to continue to lead. Last year, we took important measures to ensure our energy security and get prices down, and your work to speed up the electrification of the EU and on a new batteries regulation will play an important role. Ladies and gentlemen, at our European Council in February, we will focus on the economy because we need to send a strong message that we will act to safeguard our industrial base. It is crucial that the EU remains an attractive place to invest, innovate and produce. The energy crisis, inflation and increased global competition are impacting our economies. Last December, we tasked the Commission to make proposals by end January, and our European Council in February will be the occasion to look into 4 aspects. First, we have to look into how the rules for state aid apply and how we can adapt them to the new geopolitical challenges. And today, indeed, we celebrate 30 years of single market. That's a great achievement, and we all want to preserve the level playing field, but we also need the single market to be future-proof. Second, another aspect is the need for flexibility in the use of existing EU funds. Third point, solidarity. Not all member states have equal financial means, so whatever changes we make need to be in full solidarity. And fourth point, last but not least, in February, we have to discuss the notion of a European Union sovereign fund investing in strategic areas, even if the goal is more a mid-term or longer-term goal. I sincerely believe we must act quickly to defend our interests and protect our businesses. And this is also an opportunity to reinforce our European competitiveness for the future. Economic package is a first important topic for the European Council, but you know that will be another, if difficult and important topic, which is migration. This is another topic on the agenda. We will discuss the concrete issues and work on areas where we can make concrete progress. We must find an effective and responsible approach. We will focus on the external dimension of migration, on the protection of external borders, and on the return policy. With the Prime Minister, with Ulf, we also talked about the EU-Ukraine relationships and the war launched by Russia against Ukraine. Ukraine has anchored its future to the EU, and the EU has anchored its full support to the people of Ukraine. As we approach 1 year of war, we are more steadfast and more united than ever, and will continue to provide strong military, financial, diplomatic and political support to Ukraine and to the Ukrainian people. Together, the EU and its member states have contributed nearly 50 billion euros. And the next meeting we'll have with the Ukrainian authorities will also send a positive message of the progress Ukraine is making on its path towards Europe. Ladies and gentlemen, dear Prime Minister, dear Ulf, I know we can count on your leadership and on the people of Sweden, and you can count on the full support of the EU. Thank you for our good cooperation.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
We'll open up for a few questions, and just a reminder to ask in English. We'll start off with the Swedish radio in front here, Susanne.
Or try my French.
And just wait for the microphone.
To Mr. President Michel, you mentioned state aid rules, a level playing field, and solidarity between member states. How will this be financed, the solidarity? I mean, helping several countries cannot use state aid because they don't have the resources. Will there be new EU money?
First of all, we have EU money. It should be a first priority, how we can make sure that this money will be very well used in order to address the challenges we are facing. And there are different possible options, and we count on the Commission by the end of January to make concrete proposals on the table. And I repeat that I see four topics, four priorities for the upcoming European Council. First, the state aid rules. We need to make it more flexible in order to take into account the current situation, point one. Point two, this is the question of the existing EU funding. How can we make sure that this is possible to be effective, and also to speed up the disbursement in order to have a more rapid effect in order to support our economic ambition. And point three, solidarity. You know that there is a mechanism that we have used during COVID, which is SURE. This could be also an option to use this mechanism. It doesn't need necessary additional financing, because there are possible financial capacities that we can use with the existing money. And then in the midterm, there is this idea of a EU sovereign fund. It will take more time. It means that we need to discuss. It's certainly not a question that we will solve in a few days or in a few weeks.
Okay, we walk out to the Swedish television.
Hello, Andreas Öbling, Swedish Television. First of all, another question on competitiveness to both of you. What would be the key here? New funding, as mentioned here, or rather looking at regulations and remodeling regulations? And second of all, to Mr. Kristersson, a national question. How would you describe the current mood and status in the NATO process with Turkey, and your view on Turkish expectations on extraditions?
Mm-hmm. Would you please
start,
Charles?
Thank you. No, you are absolutely right that competitiveness is a key priority. And in fact, this is indeed an important year. We are celebrating 30 years of the single market, and the single market is the strongest possible asset for the EU. This is the basis for our social protections across the EU. It's also the reason for this very strong European position in the world. This is one first element. But what's the current situation, if I'm candid with all of you? First, we have, for very good reason, within the EU, the highest labor cost, because we have a social model, which is very good, point one. Point two, we have also very high environmental and climate standards, because we want to lead, we want to convince the rest of the world that we need all together to address these climate change challenges. But it means there is an effect for our businesses, the big businesses, but also the SMEs. And three, we have today an energy crisis. And it's very important also to address the question of energy, because this is a topic related to climate change. It's a topic related to the cost of living for the families, for the businesses, for the households, and also for the companies and for the competitiveness of our industry. And on the one hand, for many years, we are addressing the question of China and the risk of over-dependencies on China, and the importance to make our relationship with China more reciprocal and more balanced. Point one, this is a serious topic because China is a fact and we need to take into account the reality. And on the other hand, there is a decision taken a few weeks or a few months ago by our ally, the United States, with this IRA, this decision to invest in the green technologies, which is positive because this is important together in order to address climate change, but with an effect, with a possible impact for the situation across the EU. And that's why the European Council took a very reasonable decision. A few weeks ago, we tasked the Commission, in order for the Commission, by the end of January, to put on the table an impact assessment in order to have a more objective vision, what can be, what should be the consequences on the economic situation across the EU, and what are the possible tools we can use. And I try to act with common sense. Let's use the state aid regime. What can we do in order to keep our model? We believe in the private sector. We believe in the private initiative, innovation, productivity, point one. And what can we do with the existing EU financial means? This is the priority. I do not exclude that some friends and colleagues will sooner or later ask for additional funding. This is possible, but this is a debate that we will have if the debate needs to be addressed in the following weeks and months. And by the way, by the end of June, we are supposed to start the assessment of the European budget, which is also a midterm occasion to address that question of financial means.
Thank you. I think it's fair to say that the coming months will challenge and will kind of test our ability to think in long term and short term at the same time. Very different kind of content, but still. And obviously, what we do in the short term cannot contradict necessities in the long term. Also important to say. I think nobody wants to see a kind of a state aid race between the US and Europe, for example. On the other hand, you have to acknowledge the fact that the US is doing things also for very good reasons. They are back on track in fighting climate. We think that climate change, that is basically good. We appreciate that. They are also reacting towards previous several years of Chinese economic actions. It's fairly reasonable for them to do so. And then the EU has to find a way of cooperating with the US without creating a bad situation for European companies, for example, in the clean tech sector. So I think this is a challenging, but I think there will be room for compromises and room for action in the short term that is not contradicting necessities in the long term. Don't forget the fact that Europe has been lagging behind in terms of competitiveness and productivity for a long time. This is nothing that the US has created through its ERA or IRA initiative. We've been lagging behind at least for 15 years in different sectors. It's a well-known secret that most of the world's many of the tech companies, they are based either on the US West Coast or in the Chinese East Coast. So we have a lesson to learn anyway. In terms of Turkiet, if you don't mind. Nej, men jag tror att vi är i en fortsatt mycket bra position. Situationen i förhandlingarna, eller rättare sagt uppföljningen av det här memorandumet, det går bra. Sen är det ju, som jag har sagt flera gånger, välkänt att Sverige har en lagstiftning när det gäller utlämningar och den håller vi fast vid. Det kommer krav från Turkiet. De prövas på det sätt som de ska prövas och det är heller ingenting nytt. Så jag tror i grund och botten inte att något fundamentalt har förändrats av detta, utan vi befinner oss på samma plats som vi har gjort tidigare och det är ytterst Turkiet som kan fatta de besluten.
Then we'll do one last question from TV4. Channel 4.
Yes, Per Hermanlund, TV4 Sweden. Ulf Kristersson, could you be more precise? When do you think Sweden will be a member of the NATO? Is it? I mean, it's an election in Turkey, and many people are expecting us to be members very quickly. But what is your guess?
I don't have any other. I think I can talk for all the 28 countries who have already ratified Sweden, and the answer is quite simple: as soon as possible. I think that's the only answer there is, because everybody knows and everybody respects the fact that every country has to make their own ratification processes. I mean, that's to say what is to state the obvious, and we all realize that the Turkish decision is only for Turkey to make themselves, and we're coming closer to a Turkish election also. So I think there are a lot of unknowns so far. But I'm still very convinced that sooner or later we will become members of NATO. And I think I feel very confident in the fact that Sweden and Finland, we are doing exactly what we promised to do and committed ourselves to do in accordance with the memorandum, and that is actually what we are obliged to do.
Before the summer or after the summer?
No, I won't give a guess. I think there are a few kind of formative. We have pre the election. Of course, I would prefer that. I think all the NATO countries would prefer that. And then we have the time after the election. We have the NATO summit in Vilnius, late June. There are many different occasions that could be marking a decision making, but for obvious reasons, there is no meaning in guessing, but instead simply fully respect that Turkey is making Turkish decisions.
Thank you, and thank you all for coming. We have to stop the press conference.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Charles. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.